I still remember the moment my world shattered. It was a Thursday, one of those crisp spring days when everything feels right in the world. The kind of day where the sunlight filters through the trees just so, and you feel a strange sense of gratitude for life's little pleasures. It was also the kind of ordinary day you don't expect will end with your life turning upside down. I had gotten off work early, a rare treat after weeks of grueling overtime. Emily had been dropping hints lately about feeling unappreciated, so I thought I'd do something nice. I picked up her favorite takeout, pad thai from that place she always raved about, and even grabbed a bottle of wine. I imagined us sitting together in the living room, catching up like we used to, reconnecting. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw her car parked there. Odd, since she'd mentioned she had errands to run all afternoon. I dismissed the thought. Maybe she finished early. But as I got out of my car, something else caught my eye. The curtains on the living room window were half closed. They were never like that. Emily loved natural light, always insisting on letting the sun pour in, even when it made the room unbearably warm. Carrying the bag of food, I walked up to the door and noticed it was slightly ajar. That wasn't like her either. Emily was meticulous about locking up, especially after the neighbor's house had been broken into last year. My first instinct was to think something was wrong, maybe an accident, or worse, a break-in. My heart began to race as I set the bag of food down on the porch. Then I heard it. Laughter. A man's laughter. Low and intimate, followed by Emily's unmistakable giggle. My chest tightened, a premonition so sharp it felt like a blade. I stood frozen for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was the TV. But deep down, I knew better. I pushed the door open. The first thing I noticed was the music, soft jazz playing in the background, the kind Emily always put on during date nights. The second thing was the smell, cologne. Not mine. A sharp, expensive scent that was completely out of place in our modest suburban home. My stomach turned as I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my ears. Then I saw them. They were in the living room, sitting close on the couch. Emily, wrapped in a silk robe I didn't even know she owned, and a man I didn't recognize. He was younger, mid-30s at most, with sharp features and a gym-toned build. His shirt was off, tossed carelessly over the back of the couch. My brain struggled to process the scene, but my gut understood immediately. Emily's eyes went wide as she spotted me. "Mark," she gasped, clutching the edges of her robe as though modesty mattered now. The man didn't even flinch. He grabbed his shirt and pulled it over his head slowly, his smirk never fading. "You're early," Emily stammered, her voice higher than usual. As if that was the real problem. I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing, and my hands trembled at my sides. For a moment, I thought about dropping everything right there, demanding answers, yelling, throwing things. But something in the man's face stopped me. That smirk. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a challenge. I realized that no amount of yelling would change what I was seeing. No words could erase the image now seared into my mind. So instead, I turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind me. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief, anger, and sleepless nights. I tried to make sense of what I'd seen and pieced together how the life I thought I had could fall apart so completely. Emily and I had been married for 8 years. Sure, we'd had our ups and downs, what couple didn't, but I thought we were solid. I thought I knew her. That illusion didn't just crack, it shattered. She came home late that night after I'd walked out, acting like nothing had happened. I didn't even turn to look at her when she walked through the door. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and unfamiliar even to me. Her bravado cracked for a moment, but she quickly masked it with feigned confusion. "About what?" "Don't play dumb, Emily." "About what I walked in on." Her lips parted in mock surprise. "Oh, Mark, that was nothing. Just a misunderstanding." She tried to laugh it off, but it came out shaky. "Brad was just helping me with some stretching exercises. You know how tight my back gets." Stretching exercises. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Instead, I stared at her, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "Don't insult my intelligence, Emily. Just tell me the truth." For a split second, she looked cornered. Then, she exhaled sharply and rolled her eyes, her tone shifting to exasperation. "Fine, Mark. You want the truth. Yes, we've been seeing each other. Happy now?" Her admission hit me like a punch to the gut. "How long?" I asked, my voice quieter now, but no less dangerous. She hesitated, then shrugged. "A few months." "A few months?" I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. "While I've been working extra hours to keep us afloat? While I've been breaking my back to make sure you have everything you need?" Her arms crossed defensively. "Oh, please, Mark. Don't act like you're some saint. You're never here. You're always at work or too tired to do anything when you are home. I've been feeling neglected." Neglected. The word hung in the air like smoke, choking me. "Neglected?" I echoed, incredulous. "You're telling me you cheated on me because I've been trying to support us?" "It's not just that," she snapped, her voice growing defensive. "You don't make me feel special anymore. Brad makes me feel appreciated." Her words were like daggers, each one twisting deeper than the last. But what truly sent me over the edge came a few days later. After that initial confrontation, Emily went into full damage control mode. She started spinning lies so quickly it was hard to keep up. One day, it was just a mistake, a fling she barely remembered. The next, it was an emotional connection she couldn't help. The story changed every time I asked questions, but the defiance in her tone never wavered. She wasn't sorry. Not really. She was sorry she got caught. I tried to focus on work, hoping for some semblance of normalcy, but it was impossible. Every email, every meeting felt like noise in the background of the chaos my life had become. At night, I sat in the quiet of our house, replaying her words over and over. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Then I discovered the bank statements. I wasn't snooping, not exactly. I needed to pay the utility bill and logged into our joint account. That's when I saw it, months' worth of large withdrawals, unexplained charges, and payments to unfamiliar vendors. My stomach churned as I dug deeper. Emily had been funding her affair with Brad using our hard-earned savings. Plane tickets. Hotel stays. Even a brand new car payment in Brad's name. When I confronted her, I expected her to deny it, to come up with another flimsy excuse. But she didn't even try. She shrugged, her arms crossed like she was bored of the conversation. "You work all the time, Mark. What did you expect?" "What did I expect?" I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I expected my wife to respect me enough not to use our savings to bankroll her affair." "Oh, get off your high horse," she shot back. "I deserve something for myself after everything I've put up with." Her words knocked the wind out of me. She genuinely believed she was the victim. I stared at her, trying to find a trace of the woman I'd married, the woman I thought I knew. But all I saw was someone I didn't recognize, a stranger who felt entitled to take everything we'd built together and burn it to the ground. In those moments, something in me shifted. I'd spent the past few days grappling with shock, confusion, and heartbreak. But now, all I felt was a cold, focused rage. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had robbed me, of money, of trust, of years of my life I would never get back. Emily must have seen the change in my expression because her defiance faltered. "What are you going to do, Mark?" she asked, her tone daring me. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. In my mind, I was already planning my next move. After the fury burned itself out, I was left with something colder, sharper, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. Emily and Brad had dismantled my life with their lies, but they hadn't destroyed me. Not yet. If they thought they could humiliate me and walk away without consequences, they were in for a rude awakening. I didn't survive the struggles of life to roll over and let this happen. The first step was clarity. I needed to piece together everything they had done, every lie, every betrayal, every stolen dollar. I spent sleepless nights poring over bank statements, my laptop glowing in the dark like a beacon of my determination. Each transaction I uncovered, a hotel in Miami, a designer boutique in New York, a $600 gym membership I had no idea she had signed up for, felt like a punch to the gut. But I catalogued it all, one painful detail at a time. Emily had underestimated me. She thought she was smarter, thought she could outwit me. But I had something she didn't, patience. I hired a lawyer first thing Monday morning. Catherine Miller came highly recommended, a no-nonsense professional who specialized in messy divorces. Sitting across from her in her sleek downtown office, I laid out everything, the cheating, the financial mismanagement, and the emotional toll. Catherine listened carefully, her pen moving quickly across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "Mark," she said, her tone professional but firm, "we're going to win this. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about proving she cheated. Courts don't always care about that unless it ties directly to other issues, like money. Your best shot is building a case that shows her actions have caused measurable harm." That was when I handed her the folder I'd been compiling, a mountain of receipts, bank statements, and even text messages I'd managed to recover from her phone. Emily wasn't as careful as she thought. She'd left her old phone in a drawer, and after a quick trip to a data recovery service, I had all I needed: flirty messages to Brad, screenshots of travel itineraries, even pictures of them together. My stomach churned as I handed the folder over, but Catherine's small smile told me I'd done the right thing. "This is good," she said. "This is very good. We'll start drafting the petition today." But I wasn't done yet. What Emily didn't know, and what would prove to be the nail in her coffin, was Brad's history. I didn't expect to find much when I Googled him, but what I uncovered made my jaw drop. Brad wasn't just a sleazy gym trainer, he was a professional scam artist. Over the past decade, he'd left a trail of angry exes in his wake, each of them duped out of money, property, or both. One late night, fueled by coffee and adrenaline, I tracked down two of these women. It wasn't hard, they'd written angry posts on forums warning others about him. The first, a retired teacher named Linda, picked up on the first ring. When I explained who I was and what Brad had done, she didn't hesitate. "I'll testify," she said firmly. "That man ruined my life. If you're going after him, count me in." The second, a real estate agent named Melissa, was equally eager. "He charmed me, made me feel special," she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "And then he drained my savings and ghosted me. I've been waiting for someone to take him down." With their testimonies, my case became ironclad. Not only had Emily betrayed me, but she'd aligned herself with a con artist who had a history of exploiting women for financial gain. Any sympathy she might have garnered in court would evaporate once this came to light. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted to make sure the truth didn't just come out in court, I wanted it to be undeniable. Quietly, I began reaching out to people in our community, neighbors, mutual friends, even her colleagues. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. I just told the truth. It wasn't long before word spread. By the time Emily realized what was happening, her carefully curated image as a loving wife and devoted partner was in tatters. People started whispering when she walked into a room, and she knew it. The day she confronted me about it was almost comical. She stormed into the house, her face red with anger. "How dare you air our private business to everyone," she yelled. "Do you know how humiliating this is?" I didn't rise to the bait. I simply looked at her and said, "You did this to yourself, Emily. All I'm doing is making sure the truth comes out." Her face contorted in frustration, but she didn't have a comeback. For the first time in our marriage, Emily was out of moves. The night before the court proceedings began, I sat in the quiet of our house and reflected on everything. Part of me still couldn't believe this was my life, that the woman I had loved and built a life with had betrayed me so thoroughly. But the anger that had consumed me in the beginning was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. About reclaiming my dignity and ensuring that Emily and Brad couldn't hurt anyone else. I went to bed that night knowing I was ready for the battle ahead. I had the evidence, the witnesses, and the determination. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't let them walk away unscathed. On the day of reckoning, the sky was unusually clear, a cruel contrast to the storm brewing on the ground. I stood in the driveway, arms crossed, as the movers carried the last of Emily's belongings out of the house. They worked quickly, placing the boxes in a neat line along the lawn. I had labeled them myself: bedroom, clothes, miscellaneous. It was a strangely satisfying way to mark the end of everything we'd shared. By the time Emily pulled into the driveway, the lawn looked like a garage sale of her life. She stepped out of the car, her sunglasses perched on her nose, and froze. Her gaze swept over the boxes, then landed on me, standing calmly by the porch. "What the hell is this, Mark?" she screamed, storming toward me. "Your new life," I replied, my voice level. I held up the divorce papers, letting them catch the light. "You've got until tomorrow to get everything off my property. After that, I'm donating the rest." Her jaw dropped, her face quickly turning red with fury. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "This is my house too." I had been waiting for that. Slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the final piece of my plan, the prenuptial agreement. It was a document I'd almost forgotten about myself, tucked away in a file cabinet for years. But now, it was the key to everything. "Oh, I said, handing her the paper. "Do you remember this? You signed it before we got married. It states that in the event of infidelity, you forfeit all rights to the house and any shared assets. You might want to sit down for this part." Emily snatched the paper from my hand, her eyes scanning the text frantically. Her face went pale as the weight of it sank in. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of disbelief and desperation. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." She tried to argue, of course. Emily had always been good with words, but this time, she was grasping at straws. "This is cruel, Mark. You can't just throw me out on the street." I stared at her, unflinching. "You threw us out first, Emily. You threw away our marriage, our trust, and every ounce of respect I had for you." Her defiance wavered, but she wasn't done. "Fine," she spat, throwing the prenup back at me. "But you'll regret this. You'll be sorry when the court sides with me." I smiled, a cold, calm smile I had rehearsed for weeks. "You're welcome to try. But I wouldn't count on Brad being much help." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" This was the moment I had been waiting for. "Oh, and Brad?" I said, my tone casual. "He's got a few lawsuits coming his way, courtesy of some old acquaintances. Linda and Melissa, to be exact. Turns out your gym trainer has a long history of scamming women, and they're more than happy to testify against him. I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for him to bail you out." The color drained from her face entirely. She started, but no words followed. For the first time, she was truly speechless. I didn't give her a chance to recover. "You've got until tomorrow," I repeated, pointing at the boxes. "Take what you want, but don't leave a mess." Anything still here by sundown goes to charity. Emily stood there, trembling with rage, but she didn't move. I hope you're happy, she hissed finally. You've destroyed everything. No, I said, meeting her gaze. You destroyed everything. I'm just cleaning up the mess. I turned and walked back into the house, leaving her standing there in the driveway. For the first time in months, the weight on my chest felt lighter. The rest of the day passed quietly. I sat by the window, watching as Emily came and went, loading her things into her car with a mix of anger and reluctance. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the lawn was clear. She had taken everything she wanted, or everything she could carry. When the house was finally quiet, I walked through it, taking in the changes. Her perfume no longer lingered in the bedroom. The closet, once cluttered with her designer clothes, was now neatly organized. The silence, once oppressive, now felt like a blessing. This was my home again, my sanctuary. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Catherine. We're in excellent shape for the hearing, it read. Their case is falling apart. Be ready to finalize everything by the end of the month. I smiled as I closed my laptop. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of hope. The battle wasn't over yet, but I was winning. Emily and Brad had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. I didn't need to humiliate them further. Watching their carefully constructed lives unravel was satisfaction enough. They had built their happiness on lies, and now those lies were collapsing like a house of cards. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The divorce was finalized faster than I'd dared to hope. Emily's lawyer put up a decent fight at first, but the mountain of evidence I had built was impossible to ignore. The prenuptial agreement sealed the deal. She forfeited any claim to the house, the majority of our savings, and, much to her dismay, was ordered to pay a portion of my legal fees. The judge didn't mince words when he ruled in my favor, and Emily's expression during the final hearing was a mixture of shock, anger, and resignation. It was over. As for Brad, his exit was just as dramatic. A month after the divorce was finalized, I heard through the grapevine that the lawsuits from his former clients were gaining traction. Linda and Melissa weren't backing down, and Brad's charm couldn't get him out of this one. Emily must have realized the truth about him around the same time because their relationship imploded. I don't know the details, but I do know he left town not long after, and Emily was left to pick up the pieces. It was poetic, really. She had gambled everything for a man who saw her as nothing more than an ATM. Watching their perfect little bubble burst wasn't just satisfying, it was justice. Once the dust settled, I turned my attention to the house. The place had become a symbol of betrayal, its walls steeped in memories I didn't want anymore. So, I tore it all down, not literally, but close enough. I repainted every room, replaced the furniture, and even ripped up the old carpet Emily had insisted on installing. I donated her leftover belongings to charity, every box a step closer to reclaiming my space. The most cathartic change was in the bedroom. I swapped out the bed for something new, something I had picked out alone, without her opinion hovering over my shoulder. It wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about taking back my life, one room at a time. By the time the renovations were complete, the house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home. The neighbors, who had been quietly supportive throughout the ordeal, surprised me with a barbecue to celebrate my new chapter, as Mrs. Carter next door called it. It was a simple affair, burgers, beers, and good company, but it meant more to me than I could express. These were the people who had seen me at my lowest, who had heard the rumors and chosen to stand by me anyway. At one point during the evening, Mr. Peterson, the elderly man who lived 2 houses down, pulled me aside. "You've been through the ringer, Mark," he said, patting me on the shoulder. "But you came out stronger. Not everyone can say that." I thanked him, his words sticking with me long after the barbecue ended. Now, I spent most evenings on the porch, a cold drink in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The peace I feel in those moments is something I hadn't experienced in years, not since before Emily and I began to drift apart. It's the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done everything you could and come out the other side intact. Do I miss her? The question crosses my mind sometimes, usually late at night when the house is quiet. But the answer is always the same, no. I miss the idea of her, the version of Emily I thought I knew. The woman who smiled at me on our wedding day, who held my hand during thunderstorms and laughed at my terrible jokes. But that woman wasn't real, not anymore, if she ever was. What I don't miss is the deceit, the cold indifference, the way she looked at me as if I were just another piece of furniture in her life. Emily's lies had almost destroyed me, but they also forced me to rebuild myself. Stronger. Smarter. Wiser. As for revenge, I didn't need to do anything beyond revealing the truth. Watching Emily fall from the pedestal she had built for herself was satisfaction enough. She had chosen her path, and it led her exactly where it was always going to lead, alone. I don't know where she is now, and frankly, I don't care. My focus is on the future, on the life I'm building without her. The scars are still there, of course. They always will be. But they're a reminder of what I've overcome, not what I've lost. One evening, as I sat on the porch with my drink, Mrs. Carter walked by with her dog. She waved and called out, "Looking good, Mark. How's the house coming along?" I smiled. It's getting there. One day at a time. That's what life is now, one day at a time. But for the first time in years, I'm looking forward to each one. I have my house, my freedom, and most importantly, my peace. And as I watched the sun set that night, I realized something: I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living.